To travel the world, that had always been my dream. To see new places, meet new people, and see the architecture of things that I had never imagined before. There was only one thing in the way. I had no money. The question was, did that stop me? Of course not. The first step was assuring the flight. After some avid negotiations, I found myself with a ticket to France to work on a farm. Big note that I had never really traveled to Europe on my own. Well, I think overseas anywhere on my own ever in my life. I had 100 euros or the equivalent of 100 euros in my wallet. No experience speaking French and no experience working on farms really. So that poses the biggest question. What the hell was I going to go do in France? Well, the simple answer is answering the call of adventure. And that's what this whole video is about. Is for you to find a way to be able to find what you're looking for, whether it's traveling, whether the business you're trying to do, and showing you that it doesn't matter if you have money or not. I think good attitude and the willing to learn can get you all the tools that you need to replace or get money. And next time they ask you why you did it, well,
Porque no.
I left with 100 euros, no plan, overpacked my luggage, and no idea what I was doing. And somehow that was enough.
So this is what a plain bathroom looks like for you guys didn't know.
So I arrived at Mexico and it was a pretty chill flight. It was a 2-hour flight. But then after that, I had that long flight from Mexico all the way to Paris. Not only had not been confined in such a small space ever for so long, but also it was when the true feeling of this adventure started kicking in where I realized what the hell I was doing. And then I arrived to Paris. Paris was kind of an overnight stay. I met a great person there who gave me a tour, who was a friend of the people I was working with. But it really started kicking in when I was in the airport because I realized not only was this huge compared to my hometown, which is super small, but I didn't understand anybody or anything. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know how to use the internet. I didn't know how to get it. It was just a shambles from the moment I arrived. But I pulled through. That night, I enjoyed a live show that I was taken to as courtesy as with the person where I was staying with, which was really nice. And then after the show, went back home, had a good night's sleep, and got ready for my first enemy, learning how to use the train station. It was really fun because I think that riding a train is every man's dream, and being able to ride one for the first time in my life at 23, 24, 25, best thing that could have happened to me. So took a train from Paris all the way to Figeac, which was about an 8 or 14 hour ride, switching a few trains. So taking consideration, I still don't speak any French, and I still don't have good internet. So after many hours of travel, I finally arrived to Najac, which is very close to where I was supposed to get, and a person was supposed to go pick me up there. Yet again, someone I had never met ever in my life. This whole transaction, by the way, was done on a 2-week prior notice. I had accepted to take this adventure 2 weeks before I took the plane, not even really knowing what I was going to go do at the farm, except that I presented some research I did on some specific plants, and they wanted some help doing some microclimates. I arrived to Vijac, and I meet another person that works in this organization that was taking care of the farm. So we take another 2-hour drive back to Najac, and I finally arrived to what would be my new home, and unexpectedly, the place that would change my life forever. Because if there's something that you have most of when working on a farm, is silence and peace. Unknowingly, that was the thing that can most ruin your mind. And to be honest, I think that for me at least, the trip, the true story kind of began there. Not when I arrived, but when just everything went quiet, when the complete silence took over. I had gotten exactly what I'd asked for, basically. And what I'd asked for was freedom, space, and silence, tranquility, not having to deal with anything. But nobody tells you that silence is super loud. So when there's no one around, basically there's no one to distract yourself. or distract you with yourself, basically. So there's no noise, no validation, no escape. And on top of it, there was poor internet connection, very bad connection. I could barely even get a message through here and there. So that just meant that I had more time to myself. So at that time, just like anybody else, I suppose, I was going through some very personal things, and in a way, I was kind of escaping from them, from not making so much money, many failed businesses, and just kind of really just feeling like I was stuck in life. And having all that being there, at first, the thoughts were super loud. My thoughts were super loud when I was kind of stuck with myself. The first thing I remember I started doing since day one, because there was no work for another month or so, was just walk. Like, no joke, the more I walk, the more I feel like I'm back in a Resident Evil game. Un forastero! Around, and there isn't a house for kilometers of distance, basically miles of distance. You could just walk for hours and not run into anybody. And if you ran into something, it was some old farm or some old shack or just an abandoned place, an old city, a little town. It was just crazy. So something very interesting happened, which is, at first my anxiety blew up, and eventually the silence was so loud that it took over my thoughts. At one point, there was nothing to think about but just to enjoy everything that I was watching and doing. And I learned my first, I think, valuable lesson. That is, I think, the first thing that I want to talk about in this episode is, if you feel like your thoughts are too loud, what you need to do is go somewhere where silence is louder. Basically, true silence, and just give yourself the time to breathe. And if it's for an extended amount of time, it's great, especially if you disconnect from everything. Bitácora de Panini was here. Decidí salir a una aventura para poder conocer más de los espacios que no he conocido. Cometí la equivocación de pensar que estaba tomando un atajo y ahora, en serio, si no sé dónde estoy. Pues es común encontrar ruinas. And take into account that right now, in the precise moment when all this has happened, I have 10 euros left in my bank account. Barely any money at all to even get around with anything. But I was on a farm, so food was something that was available. So I had literally nothing to worry about. And that's exactly kind of the first essence of life, I feel, is learning to have nothing. If you have a place where to sleep, some food where to eat, a place where to shower, you've got time to take on yourself. And that's exactly what happened. Just kind of as inertia, I fell into a routine of cleaning, doing exercise, gardening, working, doing all sorts of things that I would have never done on my own, especially at that age. So lesson 1 emerges, which is the void. The more time I spent in silence and in nothingness, basically, the less empty I felt. Why? Because the void sort of sucks everything away, and that's kind of what silence does. It kind of takes everything away. The days stop feeling like days. Time was measured by sunrises and sunsets, and it was about doing as much as I could during my day without a rush of trying to worry about what I was doing. So that's the first lesson. If you're trying to maybe find peace, is let the void make you empty. And I think if you're trying to find yourself, as opposed to going to other places and trying to meet a whole bunch of people at the start, maybe starting off by removing everything from your life and being in complete silence, having no money, having just the necessary things for your comfortable existence, that will really clear out your brain and flush out the energy. Anything negative inside of you will be flushed out. Now, ironically, God works in mysterious ways. So once I felt like I kind of got a hold on being alone and being in my silence and having those true talks with myself, God decides to send me some buddies. And the first person I met during this great adventure of mine was my good pal, friend, brother, Stain. The
It's something I practice every day. The healthy lifestyle, it grows every day a little bit more. Every day I learn more about the ingredients.
Now, Stain is not the average person you would meet. We're completely opposite people. He was already a quiet person by nature. He was a very relaxed, kind of grounded, had routines. He was everything I had just basically become, which was ironically very interesting. And then over time, what would happen is that we became part of each other's routine. He would cook for us. He'd make sure that I had a specific diet. And then eventually we'd start going on routine walks. We started going on routine little adventures. You go, for example, shopping. And when we went shopping, we'd have to drive about 20 minutes to the closest supermarket, to the closest place where there would be like an actual like sales to buy our veggies and goods, or legumes, as you'd say in that time. And through these, we'd take small pauses and watch the sunset and relax. And it was a brotherhood in a way. It became a brotherhood. We would talk, these conversations that I was having with myself, I could finally have with someone else who was kind of in the same page. And a very true friendship was born, even though we had a great age difference. I still have a great age difference. But from there is the first person that I met in this great adventure. And then after about 2 weeks of getting to know each other, work began. Ideally, what I was supposed to be doing in France is helping create research to be able to counteract climate change, creating microclimates with specific types of plants that the French government was now allowing legally to be grown. So what I was doing is creating a prototype of what we were trying to do on a miniature scale that we could eventually scale up to be able to work with crops all over the southern French area. And that's where Stan and I got into work. I would be lead project manager and researcher, and with help with some professionals, and then Stan, being a herbalist, would be helping me out with the process as well, and understanding herbs and different processes that we could use in permaculture. Method to obtain it all, we could call it the true law of attraction. See, the law of attraction, I think, requires 5 things to be fulfilled in order for it to happen, or in order for you to get what you're asking for or trying to attract. I had actually put in a bucket list, and that'd be number 1, which is keep a organized method to know how many steps there are to get or complete what you want to get or complete. My best recommendation for that is a bucket list. So you just grab a special notebook where you put everything that you want and everything that you desire, whether it's a physical thing that you need to purchase or whether it's something about yourself that want to get better, and review that bucket list periodically. Then what you do is that you create a clear, segmented set of steps that require. So for example, I want to buy a car, a $50,000 car, a $10,000 car. Try to be as specific as you can when you're asking these things. And then you break it down. I need to get this amount of money. How can I do it? And this will get you to find skills, basically. Step number 2 is develop your skills. There's something that's worth more than money, and there's something that's worth more than gold and Bitcoin and everything in the world, which is human creativity and capability. Finding good workers and people who know how to work properly and have a very large amount of skill sets is very hard to find. Therefore, that's what I specialize myself in. So how did I end up getting this trip to France? Was not necessarily because I was a genius. It was more because I had the skill set to develop projects, which is something that I love doing. It's solving problems and developing projects. That's number 2, develop your skill set. How do you know what your skills are? It's usually things that you enjoy doing. I enjoy researching, and I enjoy building and making things. And talking to people. I think those are the 3 things that come together. So that's the second, is build your skill set. 3, polish your skill set. You have to really become almost an expert in what you do. Now, an expert doesn't compare yourself to the traders of Wall Street if you're getting into trading, but at least knowing how to do trading and getting positive trades in your trades counts. You're already doing more than most of the population. Same thing with art, same thing with everything. All right, once you've polished your skill set, step number 4, almost the last one, is to expand your skill set, which basically says, where can I use my new skills? What fields can I be using these in? And that's how you expand, because once you use your skill set in the practical sense, a whole bunch of new things will happen, which is, first of all, you gain more experience. B, you gain reputation. And C, you're going to obtain newer skill sets off of that, micro skill sets you could call them. And then fifth and last is lose the dogma, the fear of any limitation you may have. But consequentially, you have to be willing to eat shit. That is probably the most important out of the last four, is that you have to be willing to eat shit and eat shit for a long time. You have to make it part of your diet, because if you're fearful and you're not sure, you're going to screw it up. But if you are not sure exactly how, but you have faith that you will, that's the important part. So understanding that you can do anything as long as you're willing to put the work in. So once you find those 5 things, then the law of the universe, then God is willing to listen because you've put work in. There's work being done. And then something happens. Once God starts to listen, God will give you the opportunities. And I'm only saying God to give it substance. You can call it whatever you want, Gaia, the universe, Harirush, Krishna, whatever you want. But once God hears it, you're going to start noticing that things are going to start shifting in your direction. When that happens, when the opportunity calls itself, in other words, 2 weeks, they said, in 2 weeks, you're going to have to take a plane and leave to Europe probably for a year. And I had to leave everything behind, which was my current projects, my current businesses, my current relationship. Everything was just 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I had to take a decision. And that's the most important part. When the call to adventure happens, in order to attain something of equal value must be sacrificed. You must exchange something of equal value. So in order to attain everything I ever wanted, I had to lose everything I already had. So that's the method to obtain everything that you want. It's obviously in a very simplified form. We'll discuss it in other videos as well. But if you want to get anything that you want, using these 5 steps to start getting the law of attracting motion, and once things start moving into motion and you start realizing that the opportunity to get what you wanted has gotten, but you have to sacrifice something in return, usually doing the sacrifice is 99.9% of the time the right answer.
But when I go, and sometimes I make this, I am alone, okay? It's not at you. But I go on a place, so I make...
This was probably my favorite, but also most conflicting part of the journey, regarding a little bit of emotional, spontaneous affection in places where there shouldn't be, and just the adventure of going from being with staying on the farm and working all the time and working on myself to have someone who instantly appreciates you and shows you around. And she showed me all these amazing places. We went to Albi. I saw the Cathedral of San Cecile, which was amazing architecture. Took 100 years to make. Then we went to all these secret little locations, tried so many different types of foods. And it was almost like a puppy love, but also very magical, very, we could say like out of a movie. And this marked a turning point in my journey, which was learning to decide what I want and what I want to keep in my life. It felt as if the universe was testing me. It was like saying, you know what? I gave you what you wanted, but now you have to decide if you want to stay with that or want something else. And if you want something else, you're going to have to sacrifice what you have. So the story repeats itself. Although not in a bad way, it was more like in the sense of, if you're going to start using this power that you've attained, which is the law of attraction, you must understand that it's basically turned on consistently after that. So therefore, what you say, think, and do has greater impact, not only in your own life, but in the world around you.